Hello, and welcome to Unreal 3 Session 10. And in this session, I'll be going over bools, switch statements, new remote events, as well as just creating a simple puzzle mechanic for a dungeon, particularly rotating wheels to open the door. So here I've created a level preemptively to save time. I've only placed 4 static meshes for wheels, a static mesh for a door, 4 triggers, and 4 toggleable point lights. You can add toggleable point lights by going into your generic browser, actor classes, light, point light toggleable. And basically all I did was I just changed the properties to this light so that it only encompasses just the wheel. So I've changed the radius of the light, the initial brightness of the light, the light color, so to specify that the light is on, and I am disabling the light so that it is invisible, so that when we put the wheel in the correct position, the light then turns on. So first things first, I'm going to create a matinee for my wheels. So I'm going to select this wheel. I'm going to open up my Kismet. I'm going to go right click, new matinee. Here's my matinee. I'm going to double click my matinee, right click in my dark gray area, add new empty group, wheel 01 is what I'll name it, and right click on that and add a new movement track. With my new movement track, I'm going to reduce the default time from 5 seconds to 1. And then I'm going to look at my wheel, position the slider to the far right, rotate the wheel 1 spoke, and press enter. I'm going to see if my animation is working correctly, and it is. And then I'm going to select my trigger, right click, new event using trigger 2, used. Basically how this is working is, when I come up to this trigger and use it, it's going to fire off the signal to play this matinee. Now there are some properties I have to change with this. I'm going to first disable my max, I'm going to change the value of my max trigger count from 1 to 0, because if we leave it at 1, the trigger will only be usable only one time, as opposed to changing it to 0, it will allow me to use the trigger an infinite number of times. Then I'm going to select or deselect be aimed to interact, so that as long as I'm in the vicinity of the collision detection and use this trigger, this will fire off without having for me to place my crosshair on this invisible trigger icon. Next, I'm going to change some properties on my matinee here. I'm going to be no reset on rewind, and I'm going to be rewind on play. Basically what this does is when the wheel rotates that 1 spoke, it doesn't return it back to its original position, causing a popping in the animation. And this allows me to, when I hit the trigger and it plays the animation, when I hit the trigger again, it'll rewind the sequence of the animation within my matinee, but not the wheel itself. The effect that this creates is when I use the trigger, it rotates the wheel in small increments, like so. So now that we have our wheel set up, I'm going to go into my Kismet, and first thing I need to do now that I have my animation working is to create the actual puzzle. To do this, I right click, new action, switch. This Kismet allows me to create conditions for when I use this trigger, depending on how many times I use it, fire off the signal. Right now I only have 1 link, meaning that if I were to rotate this wheel once, it fires off the signal and that's it. But given that there are 4 wheels in the room, I'm going to switch the link count from 1 to 4. So now that makes it so it's 4 possible signals that can be sent, because that's how many wheels are in the room. Or I could even increase the amount of link counts by the number of spokes I have on my wheel. Since I have 5 spokes, I can change the switch to 5. So since that makes sense with my wheel, I'll leave it at 5. And one last thing I have to address is once I go through the switch 5 times, it'll stay stuck at 5 times unless I enable B looping. This allows me so that when I get to link number 5, it goes back to link number 1 and goes down the list accordingly for infinite amount of times. So now that that's all explained, I'll need to create a Boolean variable. To do this, I'm going to right-click, New Variable, Bool. The default is always false, but you can change the value to true. If you go to bValue and change it to 1, it changes the Boolean to a true statement. If you change it back to 0, it becomes false. I'm going to declare this variable, this bool, wheel01. Now I'm going to need the functionality of having a true statement for wheel01. To do this, I'm going to need to go to New Action, Set Variable, Bool. I'll need 2 of these. The reason I need 2 is because this default value of false will at some point within my switch change to true. And then once I rotate the wheel again to a position that I don't want it to be in, it needs to change this value back to false. So to better visually see this, I'm going to create the true statement. Right now it's at false, so I'll change this to true and then create the false statement. Next, I need to create a named variable. To do this, I right-click, New Variable, Named Variable. You'll see that it's a weird X kind of thing because this isn't calling anything. So let me make 2 of these and connect them. I'm going to name this variable wheel01 and name this variable wheel01. You'll notice that the red X is changed to green check marks. That's because these named variables are recognizing it being itself being called over here, wheel01. So basically how I'm going to work this is, when I rotate the wheel twice, it's going to change the value of wheel01, which is declared here, from false to true. When I rotate the wheel for a 3rd time, it's going to change the value of wheel01 back to false. So now that we have all that straightened out, I'm going to create a toggle just so I know that the wheel is in the right position. I'm going to go to New Action, Toggle, Toggle. I'm going to select the light that I want to toggle, right-click on my target, New Object Variable using Point Light Toggleable to. And basically how this is going to work is, when the statement is true, we're going to turn on this light. When the statement is false, we're going to turn it off. Next, I need to create a new Kismet. It's called a new remote event. If I hold the R key on my keyboard and left click, I'm going to get this little pop-up window. I'm going to change the event name to compare. So you can see I've created a new Kismet here. And basically how this works is, this little tag here is going to store the data from our Kismet over here. The data being that this statement is true. So this statement true is being recorded inside this activate remote, and then this activate remote is sending it, regardless of where this guy is, somewhere in my Kismet, over to here, my remote event, where that data is stored. I'm going to change the remote event max trigger count to 0 as I have multiple wheels. So right now I have a completely working Kismet for one wheel. Unfortunately, I have 3 other wheels to do. So a very easy way to do this is to copy paste this whole entire Kismet, but you got to be careful because you have to make sure to change all the values, every single one. For example, we're not using trigger 2, we'll be using trigger 3 used. We have to play this and use this switch statement. We have to change the max trigger count to 0 and disable the be aimed to interact. We'll also need to change the variable wheel 01 to wheel 02, as this is the second wheel. This will affect the rest of the Kismet, as you can see, so this too has to change to the appropriate values of wheel 02 for both bools. Next, since we're using a completely different toggleable light, we have to use this light, right click, new object variable, using this new light. Lastly, we have to change the matinee sequence for the wheel that's being rotated, as that is not the correct wheel. So now wheel 01 is now using actually wheel 02. So now to test this, I'll go into my level. I rotate this wheel 1, 2. So you can see the light turns on. If I rotate the wheel a third time, it turns off. This 1, 2, the wheel is on. If I turn it a third time, the wheel turns off. To keep better track of my rotations on my animation, I'm going to put a set activate delay for turning this wheel, the light on, to 1 second, the duration of my animation. I'm going to copy this yet again and repeat the process for a third and fourth time. So I'm going to delete this, used, max trigger count of 1, be aimed to interact, disabled. We're going to play the matinee, use the switch, change wheel 02 to wheel 03 in accordance to everything else. Change the light being used, and change the static mesh. Everything looks in order. We'll do this one last time. Delete this, used, play, switch, max trigger count 0, be aimed to interact. We'll change this to wheel 04 along with these. We'll use our fourth light, and we'll use our fourth wheel. And now, when we go into the level, each wheel will turn independently of itself, activate its own light source. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So as you can see, we have all 4 wheels lighting up when they have been rotated twice, but the door is not opening. So now we need to have all the data that we've stored of the true statements over here, 1, 2, 3, 4 into this remote event. To do this, we're going to have to go to new condition. Actually, should be here. Compare bool. There it is. So now that we have this compare bool, basically what's going to happen is these 4 signals are going to be compared. In order to compare them, I need to create the 4 different kinds of calls being utilized here. So to do this, I'm going to right click, new variable, named variable. I'm going to create 4 of these. And I'm going to name them wheel 01, connect them, wheel 02, wheel 03, wheel 04, wheel 01. So now, as these 4 things have been collected, if all statements are true, which wheel 01 from false changes to true, and if this is true for all 4 wheels, as we can see, wheel 01 to true, wheel 02 to true, wheel 03 to true, wheel 04 to true, then it's going to fire off our next thing. And our next thing is our door coming down. So with my door selected, I'm going to select new matinee. It's going to play this matinee. Add new empty group, door, add new movement track, and let's say it'll take the full 5 seconds to lower the door. So now let's test out if our Kismet works. 1, 2, light is on, door is not open. 1, 2, light is on, door is still not open. 1, 2, light is on, door not open. And 1, 2, door is on, or light is on, and door is now opened. So I have now created a puzzle element in my level. Obviously there are some things I can do to adjust how well this is being presented. For example, I can put the set activate delay to 1 second here so that it compensates for the animation. I could also place sound effects. So say for instance, new action, sound, play sound. I can play the sound, or actually, every time I press this, it can play the sound. Whoops. Sound, play sound. Assign a sound, and it will play the sound, and so on and so forth throughout the whole entire Kismet. And that's how you essentially create a puzzle mechanic for your levels. So let me know if this helps, and if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll catch you guys later.